But tonight we are going to talk just a little bit about what it looks like in the middle of the month. So we're right in that kind of that zone, that week that I think happens every month, honestly, where we have made our goals. We're excited at the beginning of the month, and we kind of map out how we're going to achieve our goals. And then we really kind of come up into this mid-month where we kind of end up feeling discouraged, defeated. And it's funny because I found myself in this place last week, like all last week. I was like, are you kidding me? Like the time, the clock is ticking down on the free shipping. My conversations weren't moving at all. And I just kind of found myself like super frustrated. I don't know if you guys have ever gotten to that place where you're like, dude, this ain't gonna happen. Like everything that I, set out for early in the month, there's no possible way that it's going to happen. And in a month like March, where we have the big incentives and adding six, I started kind of like looking at my current reality, right? Started kind of like feeling like, okay, I know where I want to go, but I don't see any visible path to get there. And so I started kind of catching myself running through, like, do I really need an iPad? Like like I just got a red light mask, so I really don't like, should I really push for this? Like, is it worth it? And you kind of start negotiating with yourself, right? You start negotiating with your goals. So it got me kind of thinking about how this is a pattern in my life, in not just in my Plexus business, but in life. But it's a pattern that I see happen in my own business and in almost everyone that I know's business. It's a pattern that kind of pops up where mid-month we just kind of like hit this space where we're feeling super defeated, overwhelmed, and we kind of just give up on ourselves. We kind of negotiate our goals, and we give up on our goals. And then towards the end of the month, you hear the phrase magic week. All of a sudden, we get excited again and think, oh my goodness, like, okay, like conversations are starting to move a little bit, or maybe just your excitement and your motivation is increased. Um, and it's kind of this roller coaster ride that we often ride month after month after month. And so we're going to talk just a little bit about it because today is the 18th. And I thought, you know what? If I have been walking through this, then it's probably what everybody's kind of feeling, especially in a big hype month, right? March it's always one of the bigger months out of the year for corporate. And sometimes when our personal businesses are not having that big excitement, like what we look or think everyone else's businesses are seeing, we start feeling less than, or we start comparing where we're at and we start feeling super defeated. So I thought, you know what? We are just going to talk about the messy middle. We can figure out how to, there we go. Um, so I'm not going to read this word for word if you want to take screenshots, but I want to tell you that this messy middle where we all are in the middle of the month, it's a normal feeling. It's normal, but it's not a place we want to stay. Okay. This is the space where I see a lot of leaders give up on their goals. Okay. This is every month. We have so many people commenting, okay, this is what I'm running for this month. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. And then after, a week, 2 weeks goes by and you're like, I have put work in and I'm not seeing the fruit yet. That's when you start feeling defeated. And the majority of people give up in this spot. This is where really high achievers really, really dig in and find where the discipline meets the road, right? This is where motivation is gone. This is where excitement is gone. This is really where it's like you find out what you're made of, right? Like what's truly inside motivating you. And because that's what our brain does everything it can to really not feel uncomfortable anymore. So it's like, like I could go buy an iPad if I really want it that bad, right? Or like, like maybe next month, things like that. We start negotiating. But discipline and grit is what sets us apart. And that's where we're taking out the emotions, right? I think a lot of people naturally just allow their emotions to dictate their behaviors or their actions. And if we do that in this business, our behavior, our business will always be on a downward slide because our mind, our thoughts, and our emotions are usually on the negative side, right? I know a lot of us have put a lot of time into mindset work. But when we're tired, when we're discouraged, when, distracted, all those things, this is when our emotions try to take over. And we want to be really, really cognizant that it's our discipline, right? Our discipline is what is going to carry us through the messy middle. If some of you I know are in the daily IPA, that's why we created that chat and that accountability group. Because I will tell you, I would say 90% of my IPA, I am not excited about. I don't know about you guys. Maybe y'all are excited about IPA. IPA is not something that I'm like, yes, I'm so excited to do this. No, it's discipline for me. It is discipline that I know it is a part of my job. And when I do it, I'm so grateful that I do it. But it's something that I have to discipline because my emotions do not want to do it. And so I want to, oh yeah, and here it says delayed obedience is still disobedience. I was thinking about that earlier about how in this kind of time frame of like struggle, right? The valley when you're in the middle, a lot of times we just procrastinate or we think like really like I don't have any conversations going, or I've got 5 carts out and they've been out for a week and no one is looking at my messages, all these things. Customers are turning off their subscriptions. We end up kind of getting in this place of procrastination, right? Or I'll put it off till tomorrow, or I'll put it off till next week or next month. And I really was thinking about this idea of when we procrastinate, we're not showing up for our business in the way that we know is required for growth, that it really is this form of, if the Lord has called you to this, that is a form of disobedience. And it's something I've really been thinking about this week of like, God has given me, he's given you this opportunity. And the way that we steward this, regardless of the fruit that we see, the way that we steward this truly is something that I was just thinking is like this is a biblical, like it's almost like your worship, right? Like he's given this to you, and how we respond, right, with it. So I was just kind of thinking about that. And at the bottom, it says most people don't quit because they are not capable. They quit because they assume the struggle means something is wrong. This is where the messy middle is where doubt is loud, progress is slow, and nothing feels clear yet. And this is when our brains start looking for an exit. So, how do I get, why is my thing? No. All right, we're just going to do that. And I think it's really valid to look at kind of your month to month, or even just your business journey in general. When we start or when we goal plan, we're excited, right? We're excited because like there's all these possibilities. You're excited because you're going to go for, you know, your incentive or the rank up and all of that. But then you find yourself in that space, kind of that space of the not yet. Like it just hasn't, you haven't hit that yet. And for some of us, that can be years long of being in the middle. And so like maybe you've made a goal of hitting a certain rank. And maybe that goal, you made that. I mean, honestly, some of us have made goals that are years and years long. Um, and so I think it's really, really valid to talk about that space of being where you feel stuck, right? Like it was so exciting. You're like, okay, I'm running for this goal. I'm going to achieve this rank. And 30 days go by and you missed the mark. And then you're like, okay, well, okay, I'm going to pick myself up. You're going to grieve for a day or two, pick yourself up and run for it next month. And then next month, what if you're further away from the mark than you were the month before? And then you get into this cycle. And I say all of this because this has happened to me a million times in this business. You get in this cycle where you're like, oh, like I don't even want to open my heart to dream again or to goal plan again because I know the feeling of disappointment. And that's really, really common when you're in that middle space. When you're in that place where you're like, man, this is hard. And it talks about here, like the middle is where it's just you and the work. You're not seeing the results. You're not seeing really much movement or progress. And maybe sometimes you're even seeing backwards movement. But this is when your doubt creeps in. This is where literally you're looking around. I don't know if you've heard the word buffering in your business, but like where you're like, you sit down to do your IPA or to message someone back and you do everything else that is like, you just look around and you're like, oh, I need to go do the dishes. Oh, I need to go do that laundry. Oh, I need to go. This is when, do you know how many house projects I have completed because of buffering? It's like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, the baseboards, look at that. Huh. I'm gonna go do that real quick.
Let's go rip them up real quick.
But it's funny because it's like our brain is doing everything to escape the feeling of doubt and defeat and all of that. And so we're just like, I'm just going to ignore that, right? Like if I just close my laptop, I don't even think about it. But this is really where we want to press in because when we start our business or in the beginning of the month or when we make our goals, it's that excitement, right? That often drives us. But as the time goes on, we have to focus on vision. Okay. We have to focus on vision. It says here, like it talks about the dopamine hit of every new customer, every comment, every shout out in this business. If we're not careful, our motivation can, we kind of ride that roller coaster, right, of the adrenaline rush. And I know for me, like I love getting a new customer because it's so exciting. It's so fun. You get the shout out, all those different things. You work to earn prizes. But when that's not happening, what is the feeling? Right? Like we feel like garbage and like we're doing whatever we can to get that next adrenaline rush. And if we are running our business, I mean, it's super fun, right? Like we get super fun things in this business. But if we are running our business from that space, that is when we really, really burn out. I put this up here because I think that this is something just to remember, that feeling uncertain or scared or frustrated, all those feelings, it doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It means you're on a real path. And so I think that sometimes when we hit resistance, our first thought is like, I must not be cut out for this. I must be doing it wrong. There must be like a magic, the magic answer. Where is it? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? Um, but when we think about growth, we want to remember that progress is never a straight line, that it is up and down and backwards. Okay. Progress is backwards, and that's important. Growth is awkward, but mastery is built in the mess. This is when we are working it out and when we are moving forward, even if the growth doesn't feel forward sometimes.
Yeah, and as Cassie was saying, I think one thing to note too, one of the good indications, and it was on one of the first slides we saw here, that you're in that messy middle and kind of struggling in that place is when you're looking for the exits. I think that's a really, we talked about buffering and tracing, but that really hit home to me. We were kind of walking through, and Cassie and I were talking about this earlier. The exit. Whenever I find myself in this middle, when I find that work is only left, and I got to do the IPAs. Somebody I read the other day, you got to go from IPA to IP, yay, but it really doesn't work like that.
Yay.
Yeah. So it doesn't feel that way ever.
I'm gonna rename them all
Yeah,
that.
you should.
That's really
IPA,
funny.
trademark, Kyle Rainey, right there. So, but it's looking for an extra strategy, and the extra strategy should be really small. Like well, you know what? I'm gonna put this off for later, and I'm gonna go do this, that, and the other. And the buffering or the extra strategy is sometimes, well, I'm just gonna quit on this month. Like I'm just gonna wait till next month and all the things. And neither of them are really great, approach to the messy middle. But the hardest part, I think, with all of this is that, the excitement fades. You got this vision, you got a goal plan, you can't wait. You say, I'm going to send out 100 messages this week, and you do all those things. And yet, things start to really slow down. And you kind of came out the starting line, not looking, really full of steam. And now you're in the middle, right? And now you got to put in the work. And that's the only thing that's left is the work. The next morning you wake up and there are no messages waiting for you. It's just more messages to send out. There's just the work. It's the work we're doing. The part where, there's no new customers yet. Your inbox is tumbleweeds, which was pretty funny. And you start wondering, and doing things in which with your time that you feel like you could do maybe other things with your time and not what you set out to do. And I think one of the things that really die here in the messy middle is our consistency. I mean, consistency is such, and we've said it many times, that consistency compounds, and we know that. And yet I think having that consistency with a built-in just natural human emotion of not really wanting to be patient in the results, leads us to this exit strategy, leads us to buffering, leads us to the messy middle where we're just looking at not any fruit coming, just continuing planting seeds, continuing doing the work. And you dread looking in your back office, you dread looking in your message boxes, and it seems to be anybody coming aboard. And so that's where most people quit, and because excitement and vision isn't fueling them any longer where it used to. It's not fueling them any longer. And as Cassie mentioned earlier, it's the vision that what keeps you going. And I think what's really interesting, particularly in months like a March that we're in right now, we all have, it's a pretty simplistic viewpoint of how to earn these incentives and how to help our people earn these incentives. You need to get 6 people, sign 3, and make a silver. And all of you are experienced enough, and you've been through this. Is not your first rodeo, that, or I'd say most of you, this is not your first rodeo, and you understand where you should be at this point. You understand where maybe your people should be at this point, and that can be kind of defeating at times. But I want you to recall too that whenever you felt like that in the past, and you put your head down and you actually leaned into the vision, and knowing that 1 month isn't going to make or break us, 1 month isn't going to be the definition of how I'm going to, be defined as a network marketer, as similar to Plexus. But it's not about just 1 month, but you've done hard things before, and you've been left with just the work before, and you've been left with, this is a planting season. You've done it before, and you can do it again. And a lot of times when you came through that, the other end, you were so thankful that you put all the effort you could in trying to do your very best in order to be able to gain that fruit that maybe not come immediately, but eventually does come. And I believe that every single one of you can hit your goals this month, and there's plenty of time left. But I know it may seem a little bit messy, as we say in the middle, because maybe we're not as far along as we think we should be. And on that note too, I think for those of us who've been around for a little bit, having the same vision, having the same goals, and yet oftentimes finding yourself falling a little bit short of those things, it can be frustrating. But when vision really takes root in our hearts, when it really takes root, we are able to have grit, determination, and realize like this will come. This will come. And this very well could be the month that starts all of that. This could be the month where we decided to embrace the messy middle, to embrace where we're at right now, and to walk forward in confidence and say, you know what, we are going to do this because you're not doing it wrong. You're just in the part that makes most people want to quit. You know, you're not doing it wrong. And I think oftentimes too, that's what's really difficult is because whenever we are left with the work and maybe there's nothing on fire, even I think maybe that's even more difficult. Nothing's on fire, you know, everything's be fine. It's just fine. It's just fine. And when it's just fine, that's almost you almost want something to be on fire. So you have something to address, something to look at, something to
Yeah,
fix.
because I think when it's quiet and it's so easy to quit with what do we call it? Micro quitting. Where it's just like you wake up and everything's quiet, right? There's nothing in your inbox. You're just like, well, what do I do with my day? Like, I mean, I know what, like I know I should be doing my activity, but so often it's easy for us just to like just fade away. And that is something I mean, even think about like the laws of nature, like it is so when you're in motion, when you are moving in activity, it's easier to stay in activity. Guys, like when you're at rest, and I'm not saying like, like resting, but when your business is at rest and you're like avoiding, the amount of energy it takes to get it moving again, to create movement and action is 10 times harder than it is just to stay in motion, right? And so that's where it really comes down to that discipline of consistency. We're not asking you to work 8 hours a day, and burn yourself out. What it is it's like, okay, can I put in 30 minutes every single day working towards my vision and my goals, rather than, okay, like maybe 2 days out of the entire month, I'm sitting down and I'm pounding out all this activity, because that's not going to get us anywhere. So it's more about these daily rhythms that we are implementing. So did you have something?
No, I just, this uncomfortable part, as it says on the slide, this uncomfortable part, this second guessing, what am I doing? What do I know how to do this anymore? It's kind of necessary. It really separates those who move on and those who, it's part of the process. It's the cost we pay. It's the price we put in growth. Comfortable and being, I don't know anyone. I've not met anyone in this company, and anybody even on our team that has been, highly successful, that has just not ever felt like this, has not ever struggled like this. So, but what if this discomfort isn't a sign to stop, but proof that you're in the process? And that's a whole perspective shift. Like, what if self-doubt is nothing but growing pains? And I can tell you, you think about the first time you went live and how anxious you were to get on live and what are you going to say? And now some of you it's like no big deal. Like you've done it all the time because you've grown through it. It's part of the process. And that figuring out stage in which where a lot of us are in. And even though, I know, Allie and Jody in here, even when you hit the jewel stats, you're still figuring it out. You're still trying to figure out. And I think if you ever find your place where you're not trying to figure out, you may be an even worse place in the middle. So you're not failing. You're not failing. You're just in that part where you don't give up.
Yeah. I wanted to have just open up and have some discussion. And I think it's important that you guys know that this is a part of the process, because I didn't realize that this doubt and frustration that came was a part of it. Like I thought, man, like why am I always stuck? Why am I always struggling? Why do I get super excited and then I want to burn it all down, and then all of a sudden somehow somehow it works out, and it's this roller coaster of
Burn it all down.
like I'm like, what is happening? And I think that I was doing just a lot of introspection this week, and then really doing some research on like entrepreneurship. And this idea of this roller coaster is what all business builders, all entrepreneurs in any field walk through this. And I think it's really important to normalize it and know there's nothing wrong with it. But when you're walking through it and you have that clarity of, oh, that's all it is. Like, I'm not going to just give up on my goals this month. It's something that I'm like, okay, I can recognize this and I can control my emotions rather than my emotions are controlling my actions. I'm still recognizing and able to process it and walk through it. So we're gonna do a little bit. I'm just gonna take off the thing so you can